Ladies and gentlemen, friends, comrades, thank you for coming. Welcome at FORMAAT. Welcome all in this old post office that we transformed over the years to a small theater. In this place we work with marginalized communities in the Netherlands weekly. People come together here to work using theater as a tool for transformation. We are in Rotterdam, in the Netherlands. Welcome to the public here in the space. And welcome for those who are at home or where else behind your computers. It's an honor to have you all as guests. During this event, we would like to ask you to send in your questions from behind your computer, or if you have any questions here in the room, just raise your hand and we will listen to it and we will try to find answers to your questions as good as possible. You can, for those at home, you can use the chat box for questioning our guests, and Karen Bevers and Tamar Kemperman, two jokers of FORMAAT, they will collect your questions and they will come and drop it on the table. And so when you have a question, just write it down and they will find it in the chat box. We would like to ask you, please write your name and your country. There is no login procedure, but then we know where you are on the globe and who you are and what your information is, so we can address it correctly to the panel members. Also, it's possible to ask questions through Twitter. Use hashtag #PanelForPeace, and then Karen will find your question on Twitter. So I said that for using the chat box, you don't have to register, but we would appreciate it. And as FORMAAT is since half a year now, an embassy for peace, this is really our first activity as an embassy for peace, which is a part of the Ministry of Peace in the Netherlands. That's an initiative of IKV Pax Christi. And they were thinking, and we were thinking, there is a ministry for so many things in the Netherlands, but there is not a Ministry of Peace. And that's why we constructed, or they constructed this Ministry for Peace. And we are now an embassy of peace. So that's nice. I like to take the opportunity also to thank our sponsors and partners, Emotive, and especially the Community Arts Lab of Utrecht. We enjoyed really your 2 days festival, and thank you for helping creating with us this panel for peace. This evening, we have a group of extraordinary peace builders in the house. And the first peace activist I like to introduce on this way. Hector Aristizábal is the founder of Imagine Action, is a theater arts organization which is based in Los Angeles. But their workshops and performances travel the world. The founder, Hector, is focused on community healing and social justice. His work has been influenced by the theater of the oppressed, psychodrama, traditional storytelling, mask making, drumming, and much, much more. In Hector's work, theater is used to create rituals allowing participants to recreate themselves and the community around them. Hector, welcome. Thank you.
I'm now in the virtual world.
In the virtual world. Welcome. And in the real world at the same time.
Yeah, this is great.
Yeah. Lovely to have you back, Hector.
Thank you, yes.
We've been constructing here some theater play together, I remember, and we had fun in those days, creating Under Pressure. But my first question is, um, how did you find the theater as a tool? What happened in your life that you discovered that?
I don't know if I found theater or theater found me or we found each other. I started doing theater in kindergarten, but I forgot about it. I had this teacher, Doña Lucila, an old woman. She was probably 40. And I was 5 years old. So and she taught us through games, through theater, through puppets, through dancing. And then I had several teachers during all my elementary schools with no imagination. So I forgot about Doña Lucila. But whatever thread, whatever seed she found in me or she awoke in me stayed there until I entered high school. And I had another teacher who was a communist. Can we say that word here? Okay. He was a communist in Colombia, which was very dangerous. He was from the Communist Party. And he invited us to read a novel and write a novel, to read a poem and write a poem, to read a play and write a play. So my play was about the revolution. And so the students took power in Colombia by poisoning the bourgeoisie and the cardinals and everybody, and they took power. I don't know what they did with it because I didn't develop the play beyond that. But so I started doing theater again, and I did it ever since. What I discovered is in the neighborhood where I grew up, it was a very poor neighborhood. Most of my friends were becoming either guerrilla fighters or paramilitary death squads or workers for the mafia. And it didn't look good to me to see that most of them were dying very quickly. But I started doing theater, and theater allowed me to imagine another life, to become other characters that were very different to my life. And that was the first time I started traveling. And also theater allowed me to meet girls, so that was a great incentive. So
your book is full of that. Just to show you The Blessing Next to the Wound, the story of art, activism, and transformation, a wonderful book written by you. Yeah. The picture on the is from your play Night Wind, and I would like to invite you just to watch a little bit about what is Night Wind, what is it about, and how do you process it. And we found a small video on the internet. Let's watch it, okay. Hector. Let's watch it.
Victims in Los Angeles to talk about torture, and then in our conversation we said, well, why don't you do an improvisation?
Nickname. Sir, I don't have a nickname. My name is... Oh! No! Listen!
The reaction of the audience was very strong. I asked a few friends, a writer, Diane Lefer, a director, BJ Dodge, and a musician in Sofina, they wanted to work with me and develop a play. We ended up with the 30-minute piece that I have been doing for the last few years. The part that was most interesting for me was the question of, now what do I do with this? Because what I noticed when I first did the play is that the audience reaction was a shock, and they seemed frozen with whatever emotions the play awoke in them. I did a traditional way of processing the play, but what I noticed is whatever this reaction was about was slowly covered up by the ideological words that people could put into the processing. And they were all very well-intentioned and very well-spoken ideas, but I found myself uncomfortable with that. I was not interested in hearing people talk about how many articles they had read about torture, how interested or compelled or upset they were. Because of the practice that I have with theater of the oppressed, I was more interested in embodied knowledge, in blood thinking, in words that are expressed not just with the sound that we can create with our mouths, but blood thinking. And so I started developing the process after the play. The first thing I do is invite people to breathe chaotically through the nose with emphasis on the exhale, That what it does is stop the thinking, because the brain cannot think when. Then we do some shaking. Then we do what I call divine madness, and I invite people to express, to let out in any sound or language, whatever emotions that they.
Please, wherever you are.
And just become a witness to whatever energy you create.
Ahora reconozcan esa energía, esas emociones. Eso es son ríos divinos. De ahí sale el arte, de ahí sale lo que hacemos que tiene sentido. Y ahí el dolor se vuelve sufrimiento. El sufrimiento es un dolor
They
con sentido.
connect to whatever energy they discover in themselves. Is their own energy. And finally, I use the djembe drum to create a rhythm and invite people to allow the rhythm to bring
Now
them back.
let the drum bring you back. Let your body move. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Wow.
Beautiful. Yeah, you explain us why you process it like this. Did you develop that further in the meanwhile, or is it still when we go and watch Night Wind that you always process it like this?
The beautiful thing about theater is that it's never the same. Every audience is different. The alchemy of what the storyteller gives the audience and how the audience process the play is always different. Even though some of the methodologies, the invitations that I make to people are very similar. I mean, you could see the play. I have done the play now in 35 countries. It was very interesting that when I opened the chamber of torture, the world came in. So the story that used to be my personal nightmare now opened the door for me to travel the world. I was not expecting that. When I did the play the first time, I was just processing the story, telling the story to other people because of the influence or the appearance of torture in the United States after 9/11. And I wanted to make it a tool for activism. But it became also, it's a great tool for activism because it activates a dialogue that is through the dynamic meditation, and then we do images. People react with images to the play, so we don't talk much. And in some way, we cross-pollinize each other. We give ideas about what could we do about torture, what is our reaction to torture, what is it that as a group we could engage on. What people do with that is not up to me to follow up. This is what I do. Also, theater became very healing for me. Because when I tell the story now, the people who watch the story help me carry the story. And it's not just my story. I also talk about the killing, torture and killing of my younger brother, Juan Fernando. So it's a way to keep him alive and to keep so many other people who have been tortured and killed. So it has become a healing experience for me, a great way of activism, and it's also a ritual. The oldest form of theater is ritual. Ritual is the place where humanity heals. It's the place where we come together, tell each other stories, listen to each other's stories, and then we resignify those stories, and we reconnect to the roots of the imagination of whatever our identities we think that they are. So I'm not doing anything new or original, except in the sense of going back to the origins, or going back to what humanity used to do when we come together as people and we create art. We use beauty. There is a poem that says that creativity is the only outcome of conflict that satisfies the soul. And every day that in my work, I have the luxury of seeing this. I had no idea what the question was.
No. As long as you keep talking, it's great.
No,
Yeah, I like to ask our second guest here on the table. It's an honor to introduce to you an American artist, Teya Sepinuck. She developed the theater of witness since 1968. It gives the theater of witness is giving a voice to those whose stories have not been heard in society, and the true life stories of people from different backgrounds are performed by the people themselves, so that the audience can collectively bear witness of suffering, redemption, and social justice. Some recent Theater of Witness program have brought survivors of violence together with perpetrators and witnesses to explore the community around them. It's a great honor to introduce to you Teya Sepinuck. I'm saying it wrong. Yeah, sure. Can I get you some water? Teya.
I just want to say it was 1986, not 68.
Ah, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm mixing. Okay. I'm sorry for that. I saw your play yesterday. I was, or the day before, I think. I was coming out and I was like, wow, I never experienced such a thing. Mm-hmm. How did you discover the theater of witness?
It's always hard to know where you begin a story. You know, in a way, I could say it began when I was 4 years old and I felt a calling that I needed to do something important in the world. But I was a dancer from the time I was 4, which was my native language in a way. That was the way I prayed. That was the way I talked to God. That was the way I felt embodied. And as I became a dancer and a choreographer, I actually wasn't very good as a choreographer, and I couldn't really express much about the human condition. Mm-hmm. And at one point, I was making a dance that used the audio tape of my grandfather, who was 88 years old at that time, talking about his great-grandson, who was my firstborn, who was downstairs, who was 3 months old, and we had a tape of him giggling, you know, when you tickle a baby and they just roar with giggles. And I used that as the audio tape, and I got so fascinated with the storyline of what is it like to be an old man at the end of one's life, watching your great-grandson being laughing and being born. And I decided after that to make a theater piece about aging, and I knew nothing about theater and nothing about aging, which was the greatest place to start. And I got a group of older people together, and we drew, and we sang, and we cried, and we meditated. We did all kinds of things, and they became the performers. And I did 2 more projects like that. Then I decided this is my life's work. I gave up my dancing and I said, whatever this is, which I didn't have a name for it, but getting to work with people who have not had a voice in society, seeing them embody themselves, and what I would say is find the medicine in their own stories of suffering or pain or woundedness, became my way of living my own life. I got to meet people, you know, refugees from Cambodia, a woman who was living in the hole in the ground, breathing through a stick of bamboo for a year in a refugee camp, a 75-year-old man living on the streets, men serving life sentences. I mean, how would I ever have these experiences of getting to walk with them? So that it really became my life.
Shall we watch a little bit so we
Sure.
can see the
Do I need to
beautiful
move?
aesthetics you are using? Also, we found something on the internet about Theater of Witness. There is a lot, I think, but this was what we like to show the people at home and here in the studio.
Does culture have a real role to play in dealing with the past? Mark McFadden's been looking at a new theatre production which allows those affected by the Troubles to share their experiences.
If you are on the streets in a little bit's time, you'll be liable to arrest.
The past can be a painful place, but examining that pain can help to ease it. At least that's the view of those behind a radical new drama.
Oh, sweet Jesus, let me see the light of day. Then the governor came and the doctor. They took the white sheet from the mirror.
It's called Release, and it premieres this week at the Playhouse Theatre in Derry. Taking part are former combatants and victims of the Troubles, including prisoners, a police officer, a soldier, a former prison governor.
My name is Vincent Coyle. I'm a native of Derry City. And my story through Release that I hope to tell on the stage is a journey that I have taken from being a civil rights activist in the Bogside straight through to my journey to be brutalised in prison, where I had a 69-day hunger strike, and I was anointed for death.
I was standing on the balcony, looking down over at my mate. He was holding a sister. She was 4 years of age.
I'm Sid Trotter. I'm a former prisoner. I work in community relations. Anytime you hear somebody being convicted of something, especially throughout the Troubles, or the conflict, if you like, you just seen the person, heard of what they'd done, and didn't know the story behind the person. So this gives me the opportunity to say who I am.
Release is produced by Theatre of Witness, a company that believes in giving a voice to those affected by the past.
There's also a release in being able to share their stories with somebody who would have been perceived as the enemy, somebody who was really the other, and hopefully a release in being able to let go of the past, some of the past.
This is theatre as a road to reconciliation, drama as a vehicle for redemption, culture as a means of healing.
People don't realise how injured they have been or are until they start talking about the past. And for me, it certainly has helped.
My name is William McKay. I'm a former prison governor. I think it's important that the security forces side of the story, which is probably from the other side of the wall, I think it's important that gets out, because I want the former combatants and their families to understand that the pain all wasn't one-sided.
In the telling, I mean, it's been difficult to very difficult to it's been an emotional roller coaster, really. Just because you kind of relive it. You kind of have, in the telling of that story, you're almost go back to that point each time. It's kind of go back to the scene of the crime almost.
Well, the most important thing for me is that people begin to listen, because that's something that we don't do in Northern Ireland. We don't listen, and if we listen to the other person's point of view, maybe then we can come up with a deeper understanding of where they were at that time and where they are now and what direction we could be going in.
After a run at the Playhouse Theatre, the production tours Northern Ireland and the Republic. And as Londonderry's City of Culture programme gets ready to roll out, these men are finding that culture and the arts can be a way to address pain and division, hatred and violence. Mark McFadden, UTV Live Tonight, Derry.
For those who want to know more about Teya's work after the broadcast, there is a book which is really fascinating. I really enjoyed reading it, finding the medicine, like you said, in stories of suffering, transformation, and peace. Probably a question you had a lot of times, but I'm going to ask it because of people at home and here maybe deal with the same question. Is your work therapy?
That is the question that people ask me, yeah. And I would say no. Therapy is really its own model that has its own outcomes and in its own reason for being. This is really theater of witness. I work with people who know, as we're working together, we're making a theater production that's going to be performed so people can collectively bear witness. And it has huge healing implications. But those are the byproduct of the process. The process is to tell these stories in a deeply personal, artistic way that will hopefully move audiences, humanize the other, bring people together across boundaries, and hopefully create some magic. And hopefully what I hear and what we get audience reflections from every performance that there's a healing for the participants as well as a healing for the audience. There's something incredible about sharing a story of suffering and knowing that that story is helping somebody in the audience who needed to hear it. You know, I know when I was working in the United States with mothers whose children had been murdered, bringing them together with mothers whose children had committed murder and ex-offenders. I remember in particular there was one woman whose son had been murdered, and she always would, you know, cry and talk about wanting to be a bigger voice for all black boys who are human and whose lives aren't valued. And she says, I stand with my head held high. And she also had cried a lot during the show. And she would be inundated by little boys in the audience who would come to her and say, I'm going to be a good boy and never get in trouble because I don't want to die, so my mother will cry. You know, unbelievable. Like, who would think that that would be healing on that level? And to be working in prisons with men serving life sentences and hear victims stand up and say, my brother was killed in the streets of Philadelphia, and I never thought I would come to a prison and actually feel love and empathy for men who've committed murder. So that changes the person telling the story, and it changes the audience. So that's my goal.
Okay, thank you. Oh, there's two
questions for you
already. Wow, this one is from Tim Wheeler, a very well-known colleague from Bradford. Reliving, is this a good thing? And re-traumatizing, re-traumatizing, is that a good thing? Teya?
That is that's the second question that people ask me, which is this work re-traumatizing? And I just have to say the answer is no. If you ask the performers, they will tell you that this was one of the most releasing, healing, therapeutic things they ever could have done. I remember in the first project that we did in Northern Ireland, there was a young man whose father had been assassinated when he was 5, and he knew there was collusion with the police. So we had a policeman in the show, and when he saw the uniform for the first time, he just would shake, and he cried his way through every performance. And audiences were always so worried about him. And I remember after the first night, I just held him backstage, and I said, Finbar, what do you want to do tomorrow night? And he said, I want to come back and do this again. And he ended up bringing more people to performances than anybody, and he just did his grieving in public. He became a vehicle to do this. You saw a little bit of Patty in that clip that we saw, and Patty had been in a car bomb when he was a child, and the car blew up moments after he escaped from the car. He was 8 years old. He cried his way through so many rehearsals, and I was worried about him. And what he said at the end of the performances after we did 12 shows, he said, you know, the 45-year-old man finally got the 8-year-old boy out of the car. And he said not only that, but that 8-year-old boy was victimizing my whole family. And now everybody's healed. So I'm careful in who I work with. I don't work with somebody who's really in the middle of the trauma. This wouldn't be good for them. Mm-hmm. They have to be enough that they can witness it.
Mm-hmm. Another question from Sanjay from Germany. Is it Sanjay or Sanjoy? Sanjay. How can we explain fear to our children in different ways we deal with it? It's for you. Yeah.
That's for me. Yeah. Hector.
Or Hector, maybe. How can we explain fear to our children in different ways? We deal with
it? And I think it connects with the idea of re-traumatizing. I mean, who can explain fear? I think we all can share what fear is for us. We all can hopefully listen to what fear is for each child. I don't think there is a standardized way of responding to any emotion. There are cultural ways. The word re-traumatizing, I mean, if I went through a car bomb or any other experience, it doesn't have to be as flamboyant as a car bomb. We all have the capacity, and we're constantly re-signifying our lives, constantly, all of us. When we tell the story, when we go to therapy, when we write a poem about it, when we put in our journals, we are symbolic beings, and that's what we invite people to do in a play. And sometimes there are tears. Sometimes it doesn't mean that because there are tears it's very difficult, or I don't believe in that thing either. Because we don't get worried someone is laughing throughout the whole process. Maybe that person is also, that's the way they are holding themselves through the process.
Mm-hmm.
So there is a lot of fear around emotions. We live in a society and a culture that every day is putting a lot of emotions in the bad list, bad emotions. And then you go to the supermarket and they sell you the book of the 10 ways to deal with anger, with jealousy, with whatever. Oh, there is an influx. The emotion is what we work with, what we create art with. It's not enough, but it's a very important part of the work. I don't think you can re-traumatize a person by inviting the person to tell the story, and especially if you are creating beauty, if you're finding the blessing next to the wound, if you're finding the medicine in the story. Mm-hmm. And again, these are all ideas. The blessing next to the wound is an African saying. The Native Americans said, we all carry medicine. Where do you find your medicine? In the things in your life that you are trying to heal. If you suffer cancer and you deal with cancer, hopefully you learn from it, if you reflected on it. It's an unreflected life can give you a lot of experiences and you don't learn anything from it. But if you reflect on your life, on your wounds, that's where your medicine is, and that's what you have to give to others.
Mm-hmm. You have to add something to that, Teya?
No, I'm very moved always by Hector. He's a dear friend of mine, and he has such a wonderful way of putting this in a very large context. But I really do trust this process because I've seen it over and over and over again, that going right into the center, in the deepest place in the wound, and finding the beauty in it. Somebody once described after one of my shows, they said it's beauty born from ugliness. And I loved that. I loved that thought, that you could take what's broken, what's dark, what's the ashes,
Mm-hmm.
and what can come from that.
Thank you. I'd like to introduce two more guests. The Afghan Human Rights and Democracy Organization is an independent, non-governmental, non-partisan, and non-profit organization established in the early 2009 by a number of Afghan human rights and civil society activists with a strong commitment to work with the most marginalized sector of their society. ARDO is committed to the promotion of participatory democracy, a culture of nonviolence, and the respect for human rights in Afghanistan and the region. It achieves these principles through employing a variety of arts and theater-based programs that create spaces for dialogue, peace building, social justice, public participation, and consequently societal transformation from the grassroots up. I want a very big applause for two people from Kabul, Zahra, Yagana, and Hadi Marifat. Welcome. Wow. Welcome. I was saying, from 2009 you have been working in Afghanistan with theater. Could you explain what happened in those 4 years while you were working with the theater?
Thank you very much, Luc, for inviting us. It's a pleasure to be tonight here. Perhaps before telling what we have did in the last 4 years, I say one small sentence, how the organization came into existence. Both Zahra and I have been living as refugees for the most part of our life. And once the Taliban had gone, after almost 25 years of bloodshed and war in our country, we have been able to go back to our country. And where we have seen the positive energy of the people and the happy faces that everyone wanted to be part of a new Afghanistan and to contribute, build a new country from scratch. And that's how we started to also contribute to that new Afghanistan and work. And I started to work with human rights organization, and I joined the UN. But soon we all got frustrated with the work that the international community was doing in our country. And that's how we came together to establish the Afghanistan Independent Human Rights Organization and to bring people together to work with the most marginalized sectors of the society, and mainly the women and the war victims. And of course, more than 20 different kinds of projects that we have put in implemented since 2004. But I'm going to talk, and Zahra and I, of course, going to talk about 2 specific projects that symbolize our work in the country. Zahra.
ما تشکر میکنم از اینکه ما رو دعوت کردیم و معذرت میخوام از اینکه نمیتونم انگلیسی صحبت کنم.
Thank you for the invitation, and I apologize that I cannot speak English.
ما قبل از اینکه درباره پروژه صحبت کنم میخوام یک صحبت کوتاه داشته باشم.
I'm going to tell you a small story first.
ما یک زن افغان هستم، مثل همه زنای افغانستان که با شرایطی که در افغانستان هست، با فرهنگی که در اونجا وجود داره، قربانی هستم.
I'm an Afghan woman, and like many other Afghan women living in country of war and violence, so I'm a victim woman.
وقتی 13 ساله هستم آرزو میکنم و در سن 14 سالگی اولین طفل خود به دنیا میارم و این طفل به خاطری که ما بسیار سن کم داشتم دچار مشکل میشد از زمان تولد و بعد از 4 سال فوت میکنم.
I call it myself victim because I married when I was 13 years old, against my will, and 13. And by 14, I had already a child, but because of the birth complication, and so I lost my baby.
و سالها با یک مرد زندگی میکنم که او خودش معتاد به مواد مخدر است و برای به دست آوردن پول هر کاری انجام میده و هر روز ما و طفلای مورد خشونت قرار میگیریم.
And I used to live with a man who was addicted to drugs, and he was doing everything for money. He was beating me and my children.
و بالاخره تصمیم میگیرم که برخلاف از جریانی که در اجتماع افغانستان وجود داره ما به یک کار بسیار منفی که به نظر منفی میاد روی بیارم و او گرفتن طلاق است.
And I did another thing which is considered to be culturally inappropriate, and I started to fight in order to get divorced from this man.
و زمانی که طلاق میگیرم ما حق ندارم که طفلای خود سرپرستی کنم. سرپرستی طفلایم با کسی داده میشه که او نامادری شوهرم است، ولی برای ما که مادرش هستم و برای بزرگ کردن از اونها ما کار کردیم، زحمت کشیدیم، ما حق سرپرستی از اونها را ندارم.
And when I got divorced, so then the problem was with my children, that as a mother I couldn't take them, I couldn't take care of them, so it has to be the father and the grandfather who have the right legally to be the custodian and the guardian of the.
و هزاران مشکل دیگه ای که با او درگیر هستم و دلیلی که ما مثال داده میره نبودن قوانین درست، نبودن پالیسی درست در افغانستان برای زنان است.
I give my case an example because of the lack of legal and policy support towards the women's rights in the country.
زمانی که در AHRDO پروژه لیجیسلاتیو تئاتر شروع شد ما فکر میکردم، یعنی با این باور بودم که این بخشی از خواسته های ما به عنوان یک زن و هزاران یا میلیون تعداد همه زنایی که در افغانستان زندگی میکنن میتونه برآورده کنه این پروژه.
And that's how we started to do the legislative theater project, and that's somehow addressing the difficulties and the problems of every woman, including myself.
اهداف بزرگی که این پروژه داشت بسیار زیاد بود، ولی بزرگترین هدفی که داشتی شریک سازی مردم عادی و مخصوصا زنها در ساختن پالیسی و تعدیل قوانین برای زنها بود.
So the main idea of this project was to bring together ordinary Afghan women that they can suggest and recommend policies and laws that can improve their rights.
همیشه قوانینی که در افغانستان ساخته میشه یا پالیسی هایی که وجود داره قربانی خواست‌های شخصی و شاید خواست‌های سیاسی و یا دیدگاه‌های افرادی که مذهبی هستن در اونجا شریک باشه یا خواسته های از اونا در نظر گرفته شود و خواسته های زنان و مردم عادی هیچ زمانی در نظر گرفته نمیشه.
Often when policies and laws are made and ordinary women are not involved, there's no consultation what kind of policies they want and laws they want, and it is the men who decide and the politicians, that they prescribe that this is good and this is bad, and of course the religion has also very strong influence.
و 100% اونجا خواست شخصی و سیاسی در اونجا داخل میشه، نه خواست یک زن قربانی، یک زنی که با مشکلات در اونجا درگیر است یا مردم عادی که میفهمن مشکل از اونا چی هست و راه حل مشکل از اونا چی هست.
And therefore the challenges that the women are facing are not addressed, as I mentioned, because laws and policies are built, or made based on political and or otherwise, calculations rather than, thinking to and to address the real difficulties.
و امی بود که ما این پروژه را آغاز کردیم و این پروژه مرحله بسیار خاص خود داشت. جلسات مشوره خواهی با کسانی که لایر بودن، قانونگذار بودن و فعالین حقوق زن بودن با اونا داشتیم. بعد از او شناسایی افراد توسط پلی بک بود، گرفتن داستان‌های زنان، خشونت‌هایی که علیه زنان صورت می‌گرفت و دایر کردن ورکشاپ لجیسلاتیو تئاتر و بعد از او به اجرا گذاشتن نمایشات قانونگذاری و بالاخره دستاوردهایی که از ساحه به دست آوردیم، سفرهایی که در 5 ولایت افغانستان کردیم و با 5000 نفر مردم عادی دیدیم و نظرات از آنها جمع آوری کردیم، این تبدیل شد به یک راپور به نام زنان افغان بعد از عصر طالبان. آیا تاریخ تکرار می شود؟
It had several components in the project, and we started to talk and discuss with educated Afghan women and with the lawyers and activists, but at the same time we conducted workshops with the ordinary Afghan women in 5 regions of the country, and we have covered 5,000 women, and the end result of this project was a legislative theater report which is called Afghan Women after the Taliban. Will history repeat itself?
و این راپور ما در ماه فوریه 2012 تسلیم پارلمان کردیم و در 6 مارس 2012 اتحادیه اروپا لانچ کردیم.
And we have presented the report inside the Parliament of Afghanistan and also launched it in the European Union office.
و این راپور یک دستاورد بسیار کلان بود به خاطر که خواست اصلی مردم عادی اجتماع که هیچ زمانی اونا در ساختن قوانین، در ساختن پالیسی سهم نداشتن، خواست اصلی مردم با شناسایی درست مشکلات در این راپور نوشته شده بود و این میتونه یک راه خوب باشه که شرایط برای زن افغانستان در آینده خوب بسازه.
And it was a little contribution to the ordinary Afghan women and about their rights and situation to propose new recommendations and solutions to the laws and the policies that are not suiting them.
Thank you, Zahra. Before we talk about the second project, we have some pictures, moving pictures of film. It's called moving pictures from your second project, the Memory Box. Yeah. Let's watch. Could you just a little bit?
خانم آلیر زمین یک بار از خودم میبینه، بعد از تا که از خانم آلیر میبینه، خانم آلیر از اینا همین قسم شما، اما شما نمیگین که فلانی چی کشیده، صرف پیش خود میخوانیم، تعبیر میکنیم در ذهنتان، اما چیزی نمیگین. سال 2011 بود که ما خواستیم چطور ما بتانیم یک خاطرات را بسازیم که کسایی که در حاشیه رانده شدن و کسایی که در اجتماع هیچ کس با گپای از اونا احترام نمیگذارن، اونا نادیده میگیرن، اونا بتونن اما گپای خود درد دل خود در چارچوکات صندوق خاطرات توسط هنر برای دیگران بیان بکنه. به خاطر از اینکه گروه مختلف با هم جمع شده بودن و هیچ کسی که دیگه خود نمیشناختن از یک طرف از طرف دیگر، چون قومای مختلف بودن و هر کس اینطور احساس میکردن که فلان قوم دشمنی ما هست در گذشته و چطور همه قربانی ها اول با هم جمع شوند و یکی دیگه خود درک بکنن و بعد چطور ما بتون اعتماد را بین از این گروه به وجود بیاریم که ما سفر زندگی را داشتیم که اینا از روزی اولی که اینا با دنیا آمدن تا حالی که اینا زندگی میکنن چه فراز و شبهایی را پشت سر گذاشتن که اینا اما سفر زندگی خود رسم کردن و در نقاط مشخص از زندگیشون وسایلی که بیشتر اینا را با او زمان یعنی ارتباط میذاشتن یا اینا را با یادی از گذشته مینداختن، در نقاط مشخص اینا وسایل جا بجای کردن.
داخل بکسای خاطرات همون چیزایی که ما از همون شهیدای ما مانده، مثلا یک کمره مانده از ما، کالایش هست، عکسش هست، گلاسش هست، شانهش هست، اینمی چیزا رو باز ما دونمو بکس خاطرات مانده. او از جان ما کده، از کل زندگی ما کده، به ما مهمه و به ما بسیار ارزشمند بود که ما نگاه.
برنامه را وقتی ما دیدیم و به خصوص حداقل بیشتر از 1000 نفر آمده بود از دیدن کرده بود از طیف‌های مختلف اجتماعی و این فکر میکنم مسئولیت سازمان بشر دموکراسی افغانستان بیشتر میسازد. بعضی ولسوالی‌های دوردست کابل وقتی آمدن هر کدام از اینا تقاضای از این داشتن که این برنامه مثلا گسترش داشته و ساعت را داشته و بیشتر از او استفاده معقول‌تر و جدی‌تر و تاثیرگذارتر در سطح ملی داشته باشیم. ما با ده‌ها صندوق خاطراتی که داریم با چی باید بکنیم؟ یا اینکه مثلا میشه که ما به خانه‌های قربانی‌ها برگردانیم به خاطر احترام به خود بازماندگان شهدا، یا اینکه نه دوباره این را تبدیل بکنیم به یک پروسه ملی در افغانستان که بخش تاریخی ما شود. این ارتباط می‌گیره به اینکه حکومت افغانستان، کمیسیون مستقل حقوق بشر افغانستان و همچنین نهادهای بین‌المللی در این قسم چه قسم پاسخ می‌ده و چه قسم استقبال می‌کنن.
Memory boxes.
Yeah, memory boxes. Well, the Memory Box project was an attempt to address the problem of the continued impunity in Afghanistan. And since 1978 until today that the war is ongoing and thousands of people were killed and disappeared, and there is no one, put in jail and tried in the court. So that was the idea to address that problem. And what we did through this project, we have invited the victims of war, and mainly widows, and also women that they have lost their sons and daughters and relatives, to tell their stories. And at the same time, if they have anything at home, like left, personal belongings of their loved one, so they should bring it to, put it in a box that we can turn it into kind of public exhibition and let the people know what happened to them. So, and then we started to work with this woman in different regions of the country. So far, we have produced more than hundreds of these boxes, and their stories came as a book. So this called, it's all the stories of this woman and how they witnessed the violence and how they lost their loved one. And the issue of memorialization became also a very crucial subject for the victims. And then we were struggling, how to preserve these boxes amidst, deteriorating security situation, and you have all these people that they did this kind of work. They are in powerful, in positions of power. We engaged with the Afghan government and mainly with the Ministry of Information and Culture. And I'm glad to tell you that recently we have signed an agreement with the ministry that they will put all these boxes into the National Museum of Afghanistan to turn it as a public exhibition for everyone, that they could come and see what happened to their country.
We'll come back on the memory boxes, on the legislative project, but I'd like to introduce our last guest, a former major of the Israeli Defense Force and one of the founders and driving forces of Combatants for Peace. The Combatants for Peace movement was started jointly by Palestinians and Israelis who took an active part in the cycle of violence. Israelis as soldiers in the Israeli army and Palestinians as part of the violent struggle for Palestinian freedom. After brandishing weapons for so many years and having seen one another only through telescopes, they decided to put down their guns. They fight now for peace by non-violent means, using techniques of the theater of the oppressed to promote dialogue and reconciliation and non-violent struggle against the occupation. Chen Alon.
I like the ritual of the water.
I know, it's beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's like bread and salt, right?
Yes.
My question is the same question as the one you started your workshop with yesterday. In the movie where an actor was playing Alistair Little, 5 Minutes in Heaven, he used the quote, "In order to know who I am, you need to know who I was." Who was Chen Alon?
The answer is who I am is who I was is always part of who I am today. That's the meaning. That's why I brought this. I quote Liam Neeson quoting Alistair Little, because I think it relates to the question you asked Hector and Teya regarding re-traumatizing ourselves or re-traumatizing the people we work with. For me, this is not a question of either activism or therapeutic. For me, from my experience, it's the same. The activist experience is exactly like what I feel with the therapeutic experience on few levels. So one level will be the experience, the paradoxical experience of therapy, which is the basis of therapy, that you are going to a therapist in order to heal yourself. And it's the same what Israelis and Palestinians are doing. I mean, the paradox of the therapeutic paradox, and I think it's the theatrical paradox as well, is the only way to really know who you are is encountering the other, is through an encounter with the other. And in our case, who I was a very violent man, or a man who was in other people. One of the first experiences I remember in Combatants for Peace, that I realized that other people are afraid from me. So for me, it was so obvious that the only one who was afraid in a violent situation is me. And it was shocking to realize that people were afraid of me. So these kind of insights are part of the process that we are trying to do along the process, as you mentioned, of dialogue and reconciliation, to meet yourself through the other, that in your emotions or your part of personality that you dislike or you try to ignore or to deny. That's one part of the answer who I was. I was an officer in the Israeli army who thought he's protecting his nation, is protecting his people. My grandfather was escaped from Europe, and he just missed the Holocaust in few years. All his family was murdered in the Holocaust here in Europe. And I was brought up that Zionism, that the fact that my grandfather was Zionist and he immigrated into Palestine, or then Palestine, today Israel and Palestine, was saved his life and saved our family life. And that's the reason I was raised up to go to the army to defend my people, because Israel is the only shelter for the Jewish people, and this is who I was. And then I realized that there are too many contradictions in this role, that I cannot integrate the counter role of this role, being a perpetrator, being aggressive, committing crimes such as collective punishment and arresting people in the middle of the night, and things that has nothing to do with the security of the state of Israel. On the contrary, in my opinion. So I've decided to take an action, and we organized, and we refused to serve in the army. We refused to serve the occupation. And later on, I will make it a long story, and we'll make it short, that we organized Israelis and Palestinians together with the same aim of breaking the cycle of violence, and to work together for peace and reconciliation and dialogue on one hand, and not ignoring the reality that Israel is occupying the Palestinian territories. The Israeli regime, the military regime in the West Bank, is oppressing the Palestinians, is violating international law by settling Jewish people in the West Bank, by blocking and sieging Palestinian villages and other crimes, and we cannot accept it. So we are healing ourselves through activism together with the past collective traumas that we have. And we are providing something which is very, very rare in Israel and Palestine, and it's hope. Because the reason that both people, Israeli and Palestinian, are stuck now is the lack of hope. So for us, this is what drives us forward.
What is the function of theater in that very process?
The role of theater is both on the reconciliation and the dialogue part. I may say I don't know exactly how Teya is working, but I think it's for just witnessing, to be together in the same space and time in order to recognize or to rehumanize ourselves and the other. Just to remind ourselves that the fact that I was able to do what I did was because of the dehumanization, not only of my enemy, but of myself as well, by doing the things I was doing. So this is one part of the work, and the other is purely strategizing the meaning of nonviolence for us, and strategizing our struggle against the occupation, which is manifested in various ways: roadblocks, the need of permits to Palestinians to move from place to place, lack of many human rights that are manifested in the Palestinian lives in the occupied territories.
We have an example of that. We have some small video clip as well from the work of Combatants for Peace. Let's watch it.
אנחנו לא נסכים עם החסימות בין שופה לטול כרם ובכלל בין החסימות שהופכות את שופה וטול כרם לבית כלא. ויש ישראלים ופלסטינים שעובדים ביחד להפסיק את הכיבוש ואת החסימות. הקבוצה הזאת מהיום הראשון שלה היא קבוצה שעובדת באמצעות תיאטרון.
אולי ניתן לזקן הזה שם לעבור, הבית שלו זה הבית הזה פה. כן, בוא. לא יכול לעבור מפה. לא.
הכל ברור. רק צריך לדעת לטובת מטה.
בסדר, תשמור עליו, הוא אמר לה רק שהיא תחזיר את האוטו לטול כרם, זה בסדר.
شعب لابوي وشعب لابوي حتى ابوي انت شعب لابوي خلاص خلاص خذ الاولاد وروحي
די, יואל, זה בסדר, הכל בסדר, יואל.
لا اتعامل في مسألة النضال اللاعنفي ضد الاحتلال اللي بشوف فيه أكثر فائدة وأكثر قوة في مقاومة الاحتلال من الكفاح المسلح.
נראה לי זה פה אמרו לנו לעשות את המחסום, לא? רגע, למה אני עושה את זה? תעשה את זה אתה. יאללה. חכה פה, שמור עליו, יואל.
أيوة لا لا أيوة لا أيوة أيوة لا أيوة
אנחנו נעשה קודם כל את הסוג של מכונה שהכותרת שלה היא המכונה של הכיבוש.
למה זה מבזה את המדים? למה זה בושה להיות, לעשות את מה שמוניר ואייל עשו פה?
Wow. What's that what Bawal calls metaxis?
Yeah, the scene you mean, that I am not sure that you've noticed where are the actors playing the soldiers. They hold umbrellas, not weapons. And where the real soldiers are, in one forum theater that you saw here, it happened more than once, but that was documented. We always have another, what we call the third audience. We have Israelis, Palestinians in the forum theater, and we always have a platoon or a company or sometimes a brigade watching us. And in this case, we were performing a scene of forum theater. And Munir, who is a Palestinian member of the group, and Eyal, who is an Israeli member of the group, they were playing the officer and the soldier in the checkpoint. And in the middle, when I explained to the audience what is forum theater, we did a warm-up and so on, and then I say, if you think that the protagonist can do something, just shout stop, and you will intervene in the scene, and you will replace the protagonist. And I explain everything, and everybody say, I ask, did you understand? They say yes. I say, I don't hear you. They say yes. And then we start the scene again, and all of a sudden I see an officer, a real officer, come up on stage and trying to arrest Munir.
Makes me think a little bit about the movie of Novecento, where they play the puppets, and then there is a carabinieri in the puppetry, and then the carabinieris come, and the real carabinieris come, and they destroy the puppetry.
In this case, he was trying to arrest him, and then we started to, and the accusation was that it's a contamination of the uniform of the IDF. That was the accusation. So I said, you know what you're doing now? I said, you are an officer of the only democracy in the Middle East, right? Mm-hmm. So you know that the censorship over theater has been canceled. So he said, but we are not in Israel. I said, that's our point. Mm-hmm. This is the point, that we are not in Israel. Mm-hmm. We are in Palestine. And you are contaminating your uniform by doing this. Contaminating? This is the word.
Yeah.
It's a good word.
How dangerous is your work?
It depends. It depends when and where. I mean, when we do this internal work of dialogue and reconciliation, sometimes we go to the West Bank. We close ourselves, 10 Israelis, 10 Palestinians. we're doing a workshop, and this doesn't feel like dangerous. But a week and a half ago, we did an activity in a roadblock, and it's always because they have these cameras all over the roadblock and the checkpoints. Immediately when we gathered, the patrol is coming, and then more forces and so on. And it developed into they throw shock grenades, and sometimes they shoot gas and rubber bullets, as you saw when we dismantle a roadblock. It's the level of danger is sometimes we can control it. We know how much confrontation we want in each activity. But sometimes the most dangerous things happen after the activity. So when we work in a village, in a certain village, might be Shufa like here, or Izbet Tabib, the village around Tulkarem where we work. Sometimes the army come later at night and arrest people, or just annoy the population, put more roadblock and so on. Yeah. But on a personal level, I just feel hostility, not dangerous.
Zahra, Gen's work is we just saw. How dangerous was your theater activities? We heard your story. I know you've been escaping the country for a while, and you went to India. Now you are back in Kabul. Your two children are also in Kabul. How dangerous is your work?
خب در مجموع چون تئاتر خودش یک در افغانستان یک از تئاتر برداشت درست وجود نداره، یعنی خیلی نمیپذیره فرهنگی که در اونجا وجود داره. اما در کنار از اینکه ما با تئاتر کار میکنیم، نوع تئاتر ما قسمی است که ما مجبور هستیم با مردمی که قربانی هست کار کنیم، و زمانی که با مردم قربانی کار میکنیم داستان‌های از اینا رو جمع آوری میکنیم، مثل از مموری باکس که هست، مستندسازی که میکنیم. طبعا این مستندسازی برای علیه یک عده دیگه از مردم در اجتماع است و این اونا این زمانی نمیپذیرن که اسنادی برای علیه از اونا جمع آوری شود و این یک روشی که کار میکنیم، یعنی خود تئاتر که ما کار میکنیم خودش از چندین بود در اونجا پذیرفته نمیشه و همیشه امکان داره که مورد تهدید قرار بگیره.
Well, it's quite dangerous. It's a dangerous context to work with theater. First, with the cultural perception or misperception, let's say, that's attached to the theater as such. And the second thing is that we do documentation to theater activities. We use playback to invite people to tell their stories, and we collect, their testimonies and their stories. And this is against the will of the people that they have committed atrocities, and they are in positions of power. So it is dangerous.
و این که به عنوان یک زنی که در بخش تئاتر کار میکنم در افغانستان، طبعا برای من مشکل ساز هست، همون رقمی که قبلا مشکل ساز بوده و من مجبور شدم که مدت تقریبا طولانی را در افغانستان نباشم و حالا پس برگشتم و کار میکنم. اما فکر میکنم یک وسیله قوی هست که ضرورت داره مردم بدو، به خاطر که همیشه درباره مشکلات مردم چیزهایی که در مملکت وجود داره تئوری گفته میشه، یک چیزایی گفته میشه که شاید ساخته ذهن باشه، اما تئاتر وسیله است که دردهای واقعی مردم رو بیان میکنه. ضرورت است که ما حداقل این وسیله را در یک راهی استفاده کنیم که بتونیم خواست واقعی مردم را مطرح کنیم و چیزی که اونا میخواین به او برسن. و ما ضرورت داریم که حداقل، من نمیگم که باید حتما بس قربانی کلان داد، ولی باید فداکاری کرد، باید این وسیله رو مورد استفاده قرار داد تا بالاخره به هدفی که میخوایم به او برسیم.
Having said this, and as a woman, when I do theater work, so it's even becoming more dangerous and difficult to do it. Therefore, I came under attack because of the work that I was doing, and I have escaped Afghanistan for a while, and so just now returned back to the country, still committed to do my work, and I don't know how the future will look like for me in terms of security. But I'm committed to the cause. I'm committed to continue my work and reflect upon those issues that are marginalized and that were not mentioned, and particularly the testimonies and the stories of a lot of victims in my country. And that, with that hope, I'm hoping to go ahead and do some work and to achieve that bigger goal that we are thinking about.
Mm-hmm. Teya, how was that for participants in Northern Ireland in the project we saw? Were they?
Yeah. I've done 3 big projects in Northern Ireland, and I would say the first one, everybody was particularly nervous because we didn't know what would happen to have ex-loyalists, ex-Republicans, security forces together. We actually couldn't put the man who was in the police live on stage because he would have gotten potentially death threats. If people knew where he was going to be performing, they could do something at the performance. So he wasn't willing to put our lives at risk. So in both the first and second show, we had to put the people who were in the police, their parts on film, which was actually even more poignant and more sad. But I think we were very worried. We didn't know what would happen. We didn't know if ex-loyalists would be furious at somebody for speaking out. We didn't know if somebody from the other side would be furious. And strangely enough, it has, as what our producer Pauline says, it has disarmed people. Because people are speaking from their heart. It has done something wonderful. And I was just talking to Sid, who was on that film, who had been an ex-loyalist prisoner. And he said all he's getting is praise from people that are still involved in loyalism because of the integrity of how he's spoken.
Hector, any moments you had?
Well, I just want to say I was in Afghanistan with these beautiful people and many others that we saw, and I know what it means, especially for a woman, to do theater in a country, in a culture where that's not possible. So I just commend Zahra and the women. When we did the workshops there, we had to be behind doors. We had to, actually I went to Herat and they put double curtains because the women could not be seen laughing and screaming and dancing with a man, especially a foreigner. But still, we did the work. Of course, the work in Palestine and Israel is incredibly dangerous. And the work, I also had the privilege with the Playhouse to work in Northern Ireland and to work with ex-combatants from both sides and know the tension that is created just by being together. However, Augusto Boal, who was a mentor for many of us, said that the only people who can be oppressed are the people who are in fear. And when the truth comes out, it is the best antidote that we can have. It's not a guarantee. I come from Colombia, where many of my friends who did theater were killed. It came to a point in which I said, well, do I really want to be killed? Is it going to be worth it? And I decided to leave. And I went to the United States, which was the last place in the world I wanted to go. It was the evil empire. And for many years, I have struggled with the jihad inside myself. Jihad is to be the battle inside oneself between good and evil, just to say it the simplest way. But with that part, and for many years, I hated people like him. Anyone in a uniform was someone I was going to hate because I was tortured by a man in a uniform, a soldier. And what it did is it dehumanized me as well as I dehumanized the other. And it has been the work of many, many years of the struggle within me, finding peace. I mean, the word peace we haven't mentioned, but the idea of peace is not the absence of war as they define it in the dictionary, is pache, is agreement. And I am constantly fighting within me for agreements, new agreements, you know, and with my partner and with my kids and with the people I know, is how do we use our imagination to reach new levels of agreements that allow us to be who we are, that rehumanize us. Mm-hmm. So if it's not dangerous, and I don't mean dangerous is let's go and put our chest so we get shot. No, dangerous is that we have to do what Zahra so courageously just said, to do what we came here to do. you know, and it's all we can hope for, is that we do what we came here to do, because it will kill you all anyway if you don't do it. Haven't you noticed that you keep waking up and something in you saying, what are you doing with your life? You know, that can kill you through an illness, through boredom, through depression, through whatever. So we came here to do something, and we have to do it.
There's a question from Hannah to you all, and I would address first to Hadi. When you reflect on your own work, what are the questions you ask yourself about the work? It's a very, very difficult question. What are the questions you pose yourself about the work?
For us, doing this kind of activities for the past 4 years, I think at this time we are really asking this question, that what we have achieved and what change we brought. And of course, when we reflect upon those changes, and so we did contribute to something. But I think it didn't really bring the overall, let's say, change. And that is something that we are always asking, how to bring change at that level. Here, at the grassroots level, when you work, you see the desires and you see the fantastic, ideas and that. But when it gets to that, let's say, a higher level, and then it remains there, and nobody act upon that one. And that is something that we have been asking, ourselves, and trying to also influence, especially that one. And therefore, we started to do advocacy for that, and lobbying, maybe behind the curtain, and that is one thing. And the second thing is, I think throughout the work that we have done, of course, it had a lot of, let's say, positive, but at the same time, it had also negative impacts. And Zahra mentioned before about, but I missed to translate that, about the concept of, sacrifice, to sacrifice. There is a need for, to sacrifice. But I think already our organization, has sacrificed a lot. And I see already the exhaustion, the frustration that we are facing. And I don't know whether we can continue afford to have more sacrifice. Already 3 people left the country, attacked, and they are living in exile in a very bad situation. And that is something that we're asking ourselves, coming together as a group of 6 people, already we lost 3, And I'm particularly at this moment very, and not in a good state of mind because of a friend, a good colleague that has been doing fantastic human rights work in the country was found dead this morning. And I'm totally shocked now. So this is some other thing that whether we would be able to also do the work in a way to protect also ourselves, because personally, I cannot accept any more loss. And when it comes to my colleagues, and she was the woman that I have worked 3 years together in the same office, sharing laughters and great moments, but she's no longer there.
I am not a master of rituals, but I think it's time for a moment of silence, I think. I feel it that way. I just would have a moment of silence.
What's her name, Hadi?
Rosanne Ali.
Rosanne?
Ali.
Ali.
Thank you, Khair. I'm sure it will be a good ritual, and may her soul rest in peace.
You have a question?
Sorry for...
No, sorry. It's good to... I mean, this is, I guess, it's the reality you are, and some of us are living in. Yeah.
So this is what always happens in this work. We're doing the soul's work. And this is an old idea. The soul is that part of us that is transcendent and is material, that is unique, that likes the dark places, that goes down into the earth, like the water. And when we do this work as artists, as community artists, as therapists, social workers, whatever that is, as teachers, you have to carry medicine, because these moments will always appear. The losses, the woundedness. Actually, the word sacrifice used to mean to make it sacred. And it's not about us going out there to lose things, but that is always part of life. Death is always part of life. It's not the end of life. That's another bad idea from medicine, you know. No, death is everywhere, the seasons, etc. But so I think, yeah, what you just brought to us is the fact that many people are leaving us. But if they were alive, they will stay alive. That's what the Africans said, that there are two kinds of dead, the dead who are alive and the dead who are dead. The dead who are alive are those who will remember. And I know you will always remember them. I do my play to remember my brother, and art does that. And that's why to say that art can re-traumatize is a very difficult idea for those, because those who are doing the work know that it's almost impossible to do that. You are really doing art. You are really transforming.
And just to take it from here, one more word about this, and I remember that there is a question in the audience, I want to add something on this and something you said previously about reflective life and to be reflective on what is happening here and now. So I think that this kind of, the fact that we are together now, people from conflict from all over the world together, it's not only due to the will of Luc or the wonderful people of FORMAAT, it's a real need to be together. So these moments happen right now. It's you and Zahra. You lost your colleague and friend, but this is something that we should not forget, that we need each other as an international, as a community, a community of peace builders, community of people who resist together, struggle together, and it happens in various communities around the world. And we think that the Afghan conflict or the Israeli-Palestinian conflict or the North Irish conflict or two neighborhoods in Rotterdam are different, but it's in the essence it's the same.
Teya, you want to reflect?
Yeah, I just wanted to go back to that question about that you talked about, Hadi, about wondering whether you were doing good, what was really happening. And I think I gave up on that question a long time ago. Because you know, there's so many layers of what needs to happen for change to occur. And I keep thinking that the only way I can think of this is that it's planting seeds, that's all I can ask for, is that I hope that this plants a seed, because I know for myself, I am sometimes greatly influenced by something that happened to me 20 years before that I thought I didn't remember. And somehow the seed of that has been growing in me, and then a change happens. So, you know, on one hand, you know, when I was working with men serving life sentences in Pennsylvania, you know, we all thought that having judges and victims and legislators come to the show that the laws were going to change. Mm-hmm. And that didn't happen. And so you could say, oh, we have failed. But I also know that we touch people's hearts and that we changed things for people. And who knows where those ripples go. And that just somehow has to be enough. Mm-hmm. I mean, maybe it isn't enough, but it has to be enough for me.
Does theater replace war adequately? It's a question from Tim.
Okay. And what about I feel that to the audience here. We promised a dialogue with the people who are here too.
Okay. Yeah, just who has a question? Just raise your hand. Yeah, please go.
Okay, I'd like to ask, in the video we saw the Afghan woman in the workshop, and I was a bit surprised that the facilitator was a man. Isn't that conflict with your religion or the way you propose each other?
ورکشاپی که ما داریم دیدیم بعد توسط یک مرد فسیلیتیت میشد و این مخالف فرهنگ و عنعنات شما نیست.
خب این بسیار سخت است که در یک ورکشاپی که خانم ها هست ترینر از او یک مرد باشه، اما ما همیشه بر اساس همون ضرورتی که در افغانستان وجود داره کوشش میکنیم اول یک ترینر خانم در اونجا باشه و در کنار از مرد. و گروهی که شما در اینجا دیدین این گروهی بود که ما قبلا همراه از تئاتر مشارکتی کار کرده بودیم، اینا در برنامه ما شرکت کردن و اعتماد کافی را سر همکاری ما داشت و یعنی احساس یک اعتماد بسیار خاص بین این نفرها و دفتر ما وجود داره.
Yes, you're right. It's not culturally, let's say, accepted, to have a man as a facilitator for totally, let's say, women that they don't know this guy. And we usually have a female facilitator in these kind of workshops. But particularly in this video that you have seen the workshop, these are the groups that we had worked with them before, and we have been able to, through the theater work, to establish trust, and therefore it was not difficult. It was not challenging for a man even to interact and work with this woman because there was trust established there, and there was so that trust kept things to go. Yeah,
it was a good thing to see.
Yeah, I have something to say and something to ask. I hope for the Afghan people that you will continue, because the theater of the oppressed is a big reach not only for persons but for the persons who are in the theater, outside the theater, and thinking with the theater. So I hope you will continue.
Mm-hmm. And your question?
And my question is, you're a panel of peace. For me, the theater brings a lot of peace, also in my life and in many people's lives, but also in the way people act with each other. Do you think the theater could become an organ or a tool for peace?
Well, I'm going to connect that question with the other question that was about theater and war or something.
Does theater replace war adequately?
Replace war. I think war is mostly a collapse of imagination. War is the worst expression of conflict. Conflict life is full of conflict. And good theater is about conflict, how we deal with conflict, with my desires who are different to your desires, who are different to other people's desires. Theater engages the imagination, is a laboratory, as I understand it and I practice it, is a laboratory to explore alternatives, not to avoid conflict, to explore alternatives. Sometimes those alternatives are violent. I work a lot with gang members in Los Angeles, and every intervention, the first 3 or 4 interventions is killing the enemy, quote unquote. That's what they saw every day in television. So after we do that, I say, okay, but what else could happen? What else could happen? And it's about asking that question, what else? The Israeli-Palestinian, is the Israelis against the Palestinians against the Israelis? Is this binary thing? Or can we engage on another way, on a third way that cannot be here or here? What is it that we need to imagine that is not in the room yet? And that's the work of art, and theater as an art expression. When people tell stories through theater of witness, they resignify their own story and the way they have been telling the story for years. In psychotherapy, we do the same. We resignify through the realm of psychotherapy. But art, so for me, theater, I agree with you, is an amazing tool, an amazing way to explore other ways. Because in theater, I can kill people and no one dies. I can be as violent as I want, but no one gets hurt. And then we can go beyond that, which usually is what comes first. And we can continue exploring because we're using our imagination, which is something that we don't see in governments, we don't see in therapy, we don't see in education, we don't see in families. So our work is to bring back that capacity, because if you cannot imagine something new, how can you change it?
Yeah. I'm just coming from a country that we have experienced war and we're still experiencing. Even the victims that we work, they have a multiple identity. It's not just like victims we say, and then when you go and dig out, and that they were victim at one time, and the other time they have turned themselves to be perpetrators. And so they're also struggling, with these 2 or 3 sometimes, identities that they're holding. And I think in the past 4 years that we have worked, let's say, with more than 50,000 of people that had this kind of multiple identities, already some of them were frustrated very much, because of the hunger and the poverty and everything. And there was a strong likelihood to go and join one of the insurgents group. But I think, at least what we believe, that those people themselves, after this theatrical work that we have did, undergone a huge transformation, and they turned to be peace activists themselves. And I think that's how you contribute to the war, to curtail, let's say, and to stop war, and to stop people to join the war front and become part of the peace front, that's what we call. And for me, yes, that is actually helping a lot to address the problem for.
People raising their hand, they didn't know, you're sure? You're sure?
This one.
I'm sorry. Yeah, Teya.
Yeah,
Speak loud so they can capture.
Could you say something about how theatre witness helps in that process? When you're talking about witness, what do you mean with witness?
Well, I think there's a multiplicity of ways that I'm talking about it. I think in one way it is the person whose story is being portrayed witnessing his or herself. And oftentimes my job is to hold a mirror up. Because I'll give an example. I was working with a family from El Salvador who had escaped the military death threats. And Luis, the only way he could leave was if his wife Sonia came with him, but that meant leaving their 3 children back in El Salvador. And they crossed the desert with men on their hands and knees sucking water from mud. And she got so depressed that she lay down to die. And he got her angry on purpose, and he said, what kind of mother lies in the middle of the desert ready to die, and got her angry, so they would walk to the refugee camp where they were beaten, and she became mute, and then domestic violence happened. This is a long story to get to the point. I worked with them on a number of productions, and at one point he called me up to say that he had been committing domestic abuse, and he kept praying, and that my name kept coming up, and would I make a piece with him? And so I did a piece, and where he really expressed that monster inside of him. But something felt unfinished, and it turns out he was still being violent. And a year later, Sonia said to me, you saved our marriage. He saw himself in the mirror, he went and he got therapy, he stopped drinking. Now I want to be in a piece. So I put them together, and the day she told her story in the group, she talked about the sexual abuse from her mother and the generations of abuse in her family. And he cried, and he said, I was supposed to save your beauty, and I failed. And at that moment, I remembered the story of how he had saved her life in the desert, and I thought, he doesn't see that he has actually saved her life. He sees himself as a failure. My job is to witness him, hold the mirror up, and have him re-see himself. So there was this incredible scene where he talked about her being one breath away from death, one breath away from life, and that he would die in that moment to save her. He would always die to save her. But he knows what needs to die. It's the monster inside of him, the damaged part, the wounded part. So in that aspect, I was holding the mirror to witness. But then the audience witnesses, and we had an example in that so many survivors of abuse in the audience who said, thank you for saying what the man who abused me could never say. who cried, who say, I understand now the role of the perpetrator. So, and there was the witnessing of the other cast members. The witnessing I remember there was one day, one of the women in the group, a very strong woman who took no anything from anybody. She looked at him one day, at Louise, and she just stuck her hand out and she said, Louise, you have to forgive yourself. And he later said it was like someone took a knife and literally went right into his heart and split it open. And this was a woman who had had great abuse, but she was witnessing him. So there's a continual witnessing. I don't know if hopefully that answers your question.
Can I come back to the question from Tim, because he said he wanted to ask the question to you. Hadi responded already to that. Does theater replace war adequately? We saw something on the video here. We showed that you were showing us a scene at a checkpoint. Is that adequate enough to work with?
I was trying in the first round. I was trying to avoid this question, but I cannot escape from that because I embarrassed to say I have no adequate answer to that question. It's I think it's similar to the thing that we all struggle. Do our work is really effective? What we do is really has a real impact on real reality and so on. And I quit this question too a few years ago. I do not ask myself. I ask myself, but very secretly, I ask myself this question because the real answer is that it doesn't matter. The real answer is that I know I embody the answer. So I do not need to ask the question. So for me, the question of war and peace is not. I don't feel it as a binary or something like this. I feel both experiences at the same time. I feel that it's like I went through the process, or we are going through the process of rehumanization. It doesn't mean that we lost the capacity of dehumanize the other. It might happen in a stoplight, when you drive and you feel like you want to kill somebody who cuts you in with or whatever. So it's an endless circle. Like we are all the time have to be in this circle, as Boal, who's our mentor, said, that it's all the time a continuous action and reflection. So I think peace and war are the same. I mean, we have to be reflective on both. Peace and war are words that doesn't say anything if you don't embody them. And it's obvious to say that we wish more and more people to embody peace, but we know that a lot of people are embodying war. I don't know if it answers, but this is the only thing that I can, authentically provide right now.
Other reflections on that question of Tim? Hector?
این یک وسیله بسیار قوی است به خاطر که ما شخصا این وسیله زندگی من بسیار زیاد تغییر داد و ما به این باور دارم که وقتی همراه از این کار ما در اجتماع کار میکنیم طبعا زندگی خیلی افراد دیگر هم میتونه دو تغییر بیاره و به همین دلیل است که ما با وجود ما و یا دیگه همکارای ما با وجودی که میفهمیم مشکلات در این بخش وجود داره اما بازم تلاش خود میکنیم که حداقل بتونیم از این وسیله استفاده کنیم و در اجتماع یک کار مثبت انجام بدیم.
I did anticipate, that this is going to be dangerous for me, and especially when I started to work and go to several provinces, and the way I have seen the reaction of the people that they didn't like this kind of work, and how they were looking down at me also. But as I earlier mentioned, it's not dangerous just for me, and it's dangerous for all of my colleagues that they're doing this kind of work. But I believe in the power of this methodology and the power of art and how it transforms the people. And to starting from my life, it has transformed my life. And I believe now that if I work, this methodology with other people, it can also transform their life too. And to that, I'm committed.
But I understand the question of my soon rather the public. We invite the public to come and see. Gen does the same. We saw that. People are sitting there. There's soldiers. There's bullets sometimes flying around. How responsible are you for your public?
The spectator.
So how responsible are we for the public, which comes on stage and show their act of
و سوال مشخص است که شما با بیننده هایتون با کسایی که میان اونا با اونا چقدر با اونا اطمینان بدین که برای ما خطرناک است.
And then Zahra, first Chen and then Zahra. Chen?
No, I would say that in all the cases of the Forum Theatre, that when the spectators, in our case, are coming to the Forum Theatre, we try to inform them what is the situation. Sometimes it's tricky because we are inviting people to a situation which is unknown to us. We don't know exactly what will happen. But the thing is that I do not accept the concept of I am responsible for that. So it's like doing this step and stepping forward into the stage. While people are coming to an event of our group, it's their decision. It's their responsibility. We are not non-violence, as Martin Luther King, I think, was saying. The best way to get shot is to be a non-violent activist. Because I'm not responsible for the other part, violence. I'm responsible that our activity will not deteriorate into violence. I'm responsible for that. Okay. In our activity, nobody will act in a violent way. But what the other side will do, this is it's a collective responsibility. So while people are taking this step and say, we are joining your activity, they have to know, and we emphasize that when we are working on the field in the West Bank, we're saying the other side is violent. You know that. That's why you did the step, the symbolic step and step forward into activism. Now it's our all responsibility. It's not, I'm responsible as the joker of the development of what is going on in the forum. I'm not responsible for other side's violence. It's very important in my view, in our model of working.
مشخصا در مورد که چطور اونا امنیت و مشکلات های اونا رو
خب ما وقتی کار میکنیم چیزی که بسیار در نظر میگیریم این است که ما اونا رو دچار مشکل نکنیم. اولین کاری که میکنیم شاید ما هیچ زمانی عکس و فیلم همراه از اینا نداشته باشیم که یعنی یک معرفی عمومی شود و برنامه ها اکثرا در بین خود قربانی ها گرفته میشه. گروپی که شما در اینجا میبینین اینا کسایی هستن که خودشون خواستن بیاین در این بخش. یعنی بعد از برنامه‌های قبلی یک از خانم‌هایی که در اینجا هست او برای ما میگفت که ما دیگه نمیخوایم درد خود برای کسی بگوییم که او هم مثل ما درد داره، ما میخوایم مشکل خود برای کسی بگوییم که عامل مشکل ما است، میخوایم برای کسی بگوییم که او میتونه برای مشکلات ما راه حل راه کنه. مثل ما را ببرین این بار به نفرهای اصلی دولت برسانیم، به پارلمان، به کسایی که واقعا در رأس قرار دارن تا صدای ما را به عنوان قربانی بشنون. او زمان است که وقتی خود از اینا حاضر میشن و میخواین که ما صدای را برسانیم، ما همراهشون شاید ما رو معرفی کنیم.
We definitely take, measures to make the environment safe for our spectators, and usually we will not take videos and movies and films or photos even from the group that we work. And of course, it depends also on the topic. And the group that you have seen here, and that there is a video about them, this group, they themselves come forward and saying that I'm not going to tell my stories, to the people that they have the same story as me. So take my story out and take me to the place that I can talk directly and encounter those people that they have did this one. So therefore, they came forward and they persuaded us to do this one. And to just add to Zahra, our work, as I mentioned, is very participatory, and it's everything they are authoring, not us. So if they decide that we should go public or we should make it, for everyone, and then even if it is going to be costly, and then it should happen, because otherwise we're not listening. We are becoming another organization that maybe perhaps take their stories and put it somewhere else, and do not do like that one. And that's how that we are accountable. And I think that's something that we always, and both way we are accountable, and both way to also to listen and to make the environment safe. And of course that is a big challenge also for us to how to really balance. And if I may add, because they themselves now, I think, the spectators, let's say, or groups that we have worked, they have developed their own sort of activities that are I would say, more radical than we are. And the group that we have worked, established, their own organization and activities, and they are.
Thank you. Tricia Wagner is asking Hector and Teya, I'm going to ask this question. If war is a collapse of imagination, what does peace look like to each of you?
Who said that, man?
Tricia Wagner.
You want to collapse?
If war...
Bringing the mic to me. Passing it off. I think of my favorite Rumi poem, which is, beyond all ideas of right and wrong, there's a field. I'll meet you there. And I think I keep coming back to that all the time, that it's beyond this idea of yes, no, right, wrong. It's about holding yes and, can we make ourselves so big that we can hold it all? Can there be room for everybody, every idea, everything? And I know that's really hard, but that is what I work towards. I don't know. All right, Hector.
Now, I was remembering a story when I was hearing the other question, so maybe this is not the answer, but 2 years ago I was working in Colombia with internally displaced people. Colombia has the largest internally displaced population in the world, and no one knows because our presidents never talk about it. It's a human rights violation of tremendous proportions, of great suffering. And we were working, and there was a scene that this young man who I identified with tremendously because he was doing clowning on the streets and teaching the kids how to read and write, and his chalkboard was the dirt, and his chalk was just a piece of a rama. How do you call that? A branch. So that's how he taught kids. And then he had been told that he was going to be killed by the paramilitaries if he continued doing this. So we did the scene, and the people intervened in the scene, etc. And that night he disappeared. And I was asking, where is Wilfredo? And he disappeared. The following morning he came, And he looked like he had been through hell. And he was shaky, he had not slept, he looked dirty, he was wet because it was raining. And finally, when he was able to speak, he said, last night, after what we did, I went to talk to the paramilitary guy. He went into the wolf's mouth. And he said, I was shaking, I could not speak for a while, I cried, and I pee in my pants, literally, and he had pee in his pants. But I said to this guy, why are you going to kill me? Why do you want to kill me? And the guy looked at me, and they laughed, and said, come on, man, I don't know, who said that? Don't worry, no one is going to touch you. And that was his story. Mm-hmm. So here is a killer, is a paramilitary person who is the owner of this place, who doesn't allow anything that is not under his control to take place. Here is this kid who is an artist and who knows he can do something with his red nose and his work. Mm-hmm. And he went and he faced this guy. That's what peace looks like me. Now, that fixed the whole problem of paramilitaries, guerrillas, the whole societal problem? Absolutely not. But in theater, we use the stage to imagine the world that we want. Augusto Boal used to say, Shakespeare says that theater is a mirror to reality. Mm-hmm. Augusto Boal said, if you don't like what you see in that mirror, then go in and change it. It's like activate the imagination, and that's what we do, and that's what we invite. And in theater, we invite dialogue. It's not just a monologue. It's a dialogue. We invite the spectators to become spectators. We talk about agency. So if someone ever get killed after participated in a play, it's not the play that killed that person. It's the environment that did not allow people to even express their agency in a play, in the realm of theater and aesthetics. So I don't think that theater can do that. In theater, we can kill and no one dies. That's the beautiful thing about this work.
Mm. Tricia just sent in an additional question, because what do you feel are the strongest aspects of your work that leads toward peace? Teya.
I would say it is hearing the place of vulnerability in people, and hearing the place of woundedness and strength so that one can humanize the other. And seeing in the work that I do, I try to bring people together that would be sworn enemies or really come from opposite sides. And their love of each other that has grown through our process is a model in so many ways, and I think gives hope. So that would be my answer.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I'm sorry to be reflective, but I'm hearing again this. For me, it's the same question, and I realized after hearing Hector and Teya that we are in Israel and Palestine, and I don't think it's only an individual thing. I think we are in one of the darkest times. In terms of that, I realize that the word peace, I can really not relate to it right now as a concept. Mm-hmm. That I'm trying to imagining what does it mean peace, what like to do an image of this thing, and I realized that the hopelessness feeling, get over this image, get over this stream of imagination of what does it mean. And I can invent some images to share some ideas how this work that we do is embodying dialogue and reconciliation and a moment of healing, an individual healing and collective healing, and how we bridge, for example, over the gap of languages. For me, it's a symbol of peace, that we are communicating without, not with Hebrew or Arabic, but we are in a space of, I'm succeeding now to provide some images of how this work is really is bringing us towards peace or thing itself as peace. And it's most of the examples that I can come up now are not verbal, so I cannot express them with words, but with images and with embodiment.
A remark of Tim Wheeler again. He's insisting, huh, Tim? Hi, Tim.
Hi, Tim. I'm happy that he's here.
This table is energized. What cannot be sorted at a table like this? Question: how do we make this table the table where decisions are made? Huh? The table.
How many?
How can we make this table the table where decisions are made? How can we, as peace activists, theater makers, that's how I I'm interpreting Tim's question. How can we become more on the decision-making part of things? Because Boal was in politics after all. He went into the parliament and he changed some of the laws, like Zahra was and Hadi are doing. They're really trying to influence the laws on a specific thing. Is legislative theater the answer to that? Open question.
No, but I think it's important to reach out to legislators and politicians to come see the work. We've only recently had this opportunity. We've been invited to Brussels and we performed, and more politicians are coming to see the work. And it feels like it's changing things. I have no evidence of anything, but there's just a sense. It feels like maybe that is part of our work, to try to bring people to us and to bring us to them.
I want to say something specifically about legislative theater, because I think it's the most neglected technique by Boal, that we hardly use legislative theater because of the specific context. And this is something which is really important to mention here, is the context of what we are doing. That we found out, we tried to use some legislative theater, and in our case it's different because we have three legislative systems. One is the Israeli, so to speak, the only democracy in the Middle East, which is the Israeli in the 67 borders, which is a civil society. I won't get into a deeper analysis, but it has its own legislative system, which legislative theater might be effective. But then we are getting into the occupied territories, which is much more complicated. There is the military regime or the occupation regime of the on 400,000 settlers, Jewish settlers, and 2.5 million Palestinians, which is a different apartheid legislative, or I would say regime or authority. And then there is the Palestinian itself, a legislative system. So we found out that we don't have a concrete system to address legislative theater. That it's always this is the problem of apartheid. This is the problem of that's what the apartheid system is trying to do: divide and conquer. That you don't know who is your target now. You don't know who is the object for the struggle. So legislative theater is not so effective in our case.
I just get a note that we have to finish because of the live stream time we have. So are any urgent questions? We have time for one more. Peter.
Yes.
Talk loud, please.
Yes. There was a question about responsibility, and then it sounded a little bit as if we were afraid for asking ourselves who's responsible if we meet. So I would like to change the answer. I think through meeting we create responsibility. So that could also bring an answer to the table. By creating tables, we create more responsibilities and we go in the direction of legislation. So how would you like to continue with this? Well, it's not a question, but more a kind of remark. What do you think of this?
We have time for one reflection, Hector, maybe? Or someone else?
I don't know if this is an answer, but what's coming up for me is a quote that came from the performers in one of my shows, and they said, the road to redemption is long, but we never walk alone. If you're tired, there's a place at the table. The gates are open. You can always come home. And I actually remember that we had a Muslim woman who said that, and we performed it in a synagogue. And there was something incredible about her saying, the gates are open in the synagogue. You, to those who belong to the synagogue, can always come home. To me, who doesn't belong here, it was something very wonderful about that. So maybe it is continually creating our own tables and inviting people to share.
Thank you, my guests. It was wonderful that you came here and shared your ideas and your extreme knowledge with us. Thank you for that. Thank you, dear guests. Thank you, Tamar. Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Ruben, who is doing the live broadcasting. Thank you, Alicia, who is behind the camera. And thank you, Kosher and Irma, for organizing this event. Thank you for coming. Thank you for watching. I hope we'll see you again on the web.
Thank you,
or
Luc.
here in the theater.
Yeah. Thank
you
you,
very
Luc.
much.
Thank
You're
you.
welcome.